Thank you to the regulars who have been joining us every month. And thank you for the people who are joining us for the first time. The last webinar, we talked about the fragility of women's entrepreneurship and the need to look at how women entrepreneurship is financed. And then we ended with asking ourselves the question, is entrepreneurship the best career option for women? If they struggle so much to get finance, if people don't even believe in their entrepreneurial activities, that there's any valuable outcome from their entrepreneurial activities, do we really think entrepreneurship is the best option for women? Or should we encourage women to go and get regular jobs? So that was what the event talked about. During that event, we asked people what they want us to talk about in the next event, and most of them rightly said that they wanted us to talk about the policy for empowering women in different countries. And so we're glad to have been able to get amazing speakers to come to speak with us today. Professor Colette just came down with COVID, so she will not be joining us today, but we will still explore entrepreneurship policies from the different countries from which our guests are represented. So I'm going to start with Honorable Fatou. She's the current Minister for Children's Welfare, Ministry of Women's Affairs, Children and Social Welfare in Gambia. Then we have Mr. Sam. Mr. Sam is an attaché at the Cameroonian Embassy in South Africa. We have invited both of you to speak to us today because we believe that you're able to talk to us from the perspective of what the government is doing in each of your organizations. And we're grateful for you for giving us your time. We're going to start, Honorable. Like I said in my email to you, we say it's a webinar, but we actually prefer to do it like a round table discussion. So there is no need for any presentation of PowerPoint. But if you do want to present PowerPoint, you can go ahead and present the PowerPoint. But we're going to ask some questions around the topic, and then you can tell us from your point of view, from the point of view of Gambia, what is going on. So I'm going to start with the first question. So when we talk about women empowerment in your country, the Gambia, what does it look like?
Thank you very much for inviting me to this webinar. And I also want to greet my colleagues who are part of this panel. Women's empowerment is all about women having a say, women being able to take decisions on their own, women being able to decide what to do on their own free will. You can define empowerment, classify empowerment into various sections: economic empowerment, social empowerment, political empowerment. This webinar, since we're talking about entrepreneurs, I'll focus on economic empowerment. We all know that in most of our countries, women form the majority, but then they also form the majority of the poor. Yes, they form the majority of the population. At the same time, they also form the majority of the poor. They form the majority of the illiterates, and they're at the lower level of the ladder. Economic empowerment, and it is when women are able to earn income for themselves and they decide what to do with the income. Economic empowerment is important because it is synonymous to economic independence. When a woman earns income, first thing she thinks of is the household. There has to be good food on the table. She thinks about the health of the family members. She thinks about the education of the children, more especially the girl child. And when a woman is economically empowered, her status is improved because she decides what to do with her income. She's no more stretching out her hand to ask for money from the husband or a partner. Because of that, she's respected in the household, in the community, and also in the nation. She decides what happens to her children. She decides that her girl child will not be married off early. She decides that the girl child is not going to be cut in FGM. It is the decision regarding her money and what entails the welfare of the family. Economic empowerment, therefore, is very important for women because her status is improved and she's highly respected. In the Gambia, we have done quite a lot in terms of empowering women economically. Because for women, empowerment is the way forward. Women face a lot of challenges. I need not mention those here because they are similar from one country to the other. Even though the magnitude may be different, but they are similar. Gender-based violence. This goes on and on and on. In our National Development Plan, we make sure that we maintain gender adequately in the National Development Plan. And we address in the National Development Plan the concerns of the female entrepreneurs. For me here, the entrepreneurs are at different levels. that woman who sells in the market, and then who orders goods from China, they're all entrepreneurs. They have the same objective. The magnitude of their businesses are different. One is a small and micro entrepreneur, the other one is a big entrepreneur. But in the Gambia, what we have noticed is that our entrepreneurs face a lot of challenges in terms of access to finance. Most of the women, whether in the urban area or in the rural areas, are small and micro entrepreneurs. They're into business, even though the magnitudes are different. But their main problem is access to finance. We have the banks, the commercial banks. We give loans, but then the requirement is something else. They ask for collateral. Here in the Gambia, if you talk about collateral, what comes to mind is a piece of land which has a title deed. You may have that in the Gambia. Very few. But if female entrepreneur, if she gets a loan from the bank, remember, banks charge interest rates. That woman will pay and pay. At least if you when we were developing the enterprise, the National Development Plan is the first fiscal in the Gambia. In 2017, we built in the Women Enterprise Fund. And our reason for doing that was because we have managed earlier faced with political components. And we have seen how it has benefited women before. I managed two of them. One was funded by UNDP, but executed by ILO. And the other was fully funded by the African Development Bank, and I was the project coordinator. So using our background experience, me and my colleagues, we built in the Women Enterprise Fund into the National Development Plan. And when we started the implementation, it prepared a legal framework. There's an act of parliament, the Women Enterprise, which explains the operational modalities of the Enterprise Fund. And for the Enterprise Fund, we encourage group lending. Here in my country, most women are in groups.
Yes, sir.
And
yes,
they meet a small amount of money, and they return in taking the money. It's not much, but at least it's supposed to some level.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
So we introduced the group lending model.
Yes.
The Women Enterprise Fund, it is the group. You have to be a member of the group.
I will come to you on the frameworks that the policy that you have now. I'll come back to you on that question. So let's hear from Mr. Sam from the Cameroonian perspective. Mr. Sam, thank you for joining us. Just before you joined, I was asking you, Honorable, I said, when we talk about women empowerment, for instance, in Cameroon, what does it look like?
Women empowerment in Cameroon has different facets. We look at it in terms of human rights, in terms of their participation in politics, their participation in education, their participation in day-to-day parliamentary work and in elections. So it is something that is taken seriously, because we know that the education when you educate a woman, you have educated the nation. So our legislation has done it in such a way that women are given priority in most aspects of our public life. And that is why the government of Cameroon ratified the Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against women in 1995. And it has got to a point where women have equal rights with men, even when it comes to inheriting property. In the past, it used to be difficult for women in Cameroon to inherit property from their fathers. So it is something that we have given a lot of attention to, and we are making progress as the years go by.
Thank you so much. You've just answered my next question. But I'm still going to ask it anyway, because I also want to cover other aspects. So we're going to ask, in terms of all the socioeconomic well-being of women, coming back to the Gambia, like you saw, you heard Honorable mention property rights. So when we look at women's well-being, in socio-economic well-being in the Gambia, in terms of literacy, involvement in politics, property rights, property ownership, and access to medical and other social services within the country, given that Gambia is predominantly Muslim country, how does that look like?
Thank you very much, Bridget. Okay, I want to start by saying that the Gambia is a signatory to the International Convention on the rights of women, for the elimination of discrimination against women, the Commission signed in 1979, and they have signed and ratified, and we are implementing it. Yes, Gambia is predominantly Muslim, and in Islam also, women have inheritance rights. It is prescribed. According to Islamic teachings, when you inherit, women inherit half of what men inherit, and there is a reason for that. Mm-hmm. The reason is a woman will go and marry into another household, where she will be taken care of, where the man will bring a woman into the household to take care of. So that's why Islam defined inheritance in that way. The woman gets half of what the man gets. Okay, when it comes to the issue of land, in the Gambia, most women have user rights, not ownership rights. Most women. And the reason being, land belongs to families. And because of the particular system in this country, men have control over land. But again, on your mother's side, you can own land. Yeah, that's also there. And now we have also seen with modernization and with civilization, and in the issue of implementing women's rights issues, we're also seeing now government allocating land to women. For government, there's no discrimination. You apply for land, you get land.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's more for women in the urban area, and we are pushing hard for women in the rural areas to own land that they work on. Before it was very, very tough, very, very tough, because projects come, agricultural support for women, but the requirement for the women to get the support is for them to own the land. It must be in their name.
Okay. Yeah.
If you want your women to benefit from this project, you must write the land in their name.
Okay.
So they will not put it in the name of an individual woman, but in the name of the women's group.
Yeah.
Which is also good, because that was not happening before.
Yeah.
So now we are seeing women's groups acquiring land in the name of the group.
Okay.
So because you see in women's groups, once there's a group, some members retire out of the group, others are coming into the group. So that's really important. Yeah, because with the group format now, we are seeing women's groups owning land so that they can benefit from funding from donors.
Okay.
So this are the sort of we are seeing now happening in the country, and we are seeing that's also very positive. It was not happening before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was going to ask a follow-up question, and I will come back to that follow-up question once we hear from Mr. Sam about Cameroon. Mr. Sam, what is it like in terms of Cameroon, the Cameroonian experience for women as well? You did mention earlier about property ownership for women, but does it go beyond property ownership? What about access to social services within Cameroon? How easily is it for women to access those services? Because most of all of these services cost money, and we all know that women's disposable income is not as good as men's own. So are they able to freely access these services, or there are hindrances to their accessing these services?
Thank you so much. The government has made it in such a way that women have been given access to certain vocational institutions, institutions of agriculture. That is why there is an association in Cameroon known as Bayamsela. You know, the rural woman, they have a structure which regulates their activities, their agricultural activities. And you notice that in Cameroon, women have become the breadbasket of the nation. And you see them very dynamic in this association. It's not about the educational level. Even women who have not gone to school belong to this association. So they coordinate their activities. They go and get food stuff from rural communities and bring to the city. So whatever happens in this association is regulated. There is a mandate for the executive bureau, such that after some time, they conduct their elections freely. Women have access even to traditional leadership. In Cameroon, there are some women who are traditional rulers. For instance, in Yaoundé, there are some chiefdoms where you have women as traditional rulers. And they have the same authority as men who are traditional rulers. Women have been given the opportunity to occupy positions in parliament, in the Senate. And that is why if you draw up a list for elections and there
Yes.
is no woman on your list, it is rejected.
Okay.
Because
Thank
there
you.
must be gender balance.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And I'm glad that you're saying this, but I'm going to bring you back to what the research says, which makes us to ask this question. And that's one of the reasons why we're having this webinar. Everything you've said sounds good, but the research also says that women are finding it difficult to even get finance. Women entrepreneurs this time are finding it difficult to get finance from banks because they don't have collateral, because some banks don't believe in banking on women. They don't have that much independence to make financial decisions on their own without the backing of maybe their husbands or a male figure in their lives that can stand as surety for them. So if all of these things you're saying the government have done so much for women in this regard, then why is there still that gap in the research that shows that women are still not benefiting from all of these good things that your governments are doing? Is it a question of implementation, or is it a question of the women don't know what the government is doing to support them? I'll start with you, Honorable.
Yeah, I was thinking that for women, access to loans from banks is a problem because one, the high interest rates, and two, the requirement of collateral. Very few women own land of their own.
Yes.
And I think what is more frustrating is the bank interest rates, which are as high as 22% in the Gambia. That's incredibly high. The reason why, when we were developing the Women Enterprise, the National Development Plan for the country, 2018-2023, we built in the Women Enterprise Fund. Yes, and after developing the Enterprise Fund, we also developed a legal framework which explains how the Enterprise Fund should be operated. In that we encourage group lending, because most women are in groups, as I mentioned earlier. And the requirements, one, you have to be in a group, and the group should not be more than 200 women in a group. You should be registered, should have a bank account, and the list goes on. So we developed forms which we have sent to the regions. In the Gambia, we have 5 administrative regions and 2 municipalities. We are a small country. And we set up committees in all of these administrative regions and train them. So when the women come to apply, they pick the forms, complete the forms. It's in triplicate, and then they click on one, and the 2 is kept at the regional governor's office. And then and here we have set up a board. And when we ask for forms, we don't ask for all the forms, we ask for a certain number of forms, because it's funded by the government of the Gambia. And so when the applications come, the board goes through the applications, and those who are qualified benefit from the loan. But then the money is paid into their bank account. So that's why it's important for them to have a bank account.
From what you said earlier, with all of those initiatives that you mentioned that the government is doing, and even with the land ownership and that group land ownership, so that was where my question was coming from. Because if a group owns a land, one individual cannot use that land as a collateral, right? So it becomes
before the group started, the Women Enterprise Fund came into being before the project came. Which which have as a requirement women to own land in their name. So the Enterprise Fund started earlier, people never the government of the Gambia. And then donors came with the agricultural projects, and the requirement is women should have land in their name for them to benefit. That came after the Women Enterprise Fund.
Yes.
You see? But then I left the linkage between those two. So for the Women Enterprise Fund, before you are given a loan, you need to have a bank account. What is in the account doesn't matter.
Yes.
And then once the group qualifies, let me just explain. Once the group qualify, our staff will train the group on entrepreneurship.
Okay.
How to start a business and how to run it at a profit.
Okay.
And after all that, then the money is paid into your account. The group will access the funds, and our staff who are working in the field will work with the women's groups to push them.
Okay.
Do the coaching. So that they use the money for the right purpose.
Okay. All right. I'll come back to you. Okay.
Can I tell you, like, please, in just in 2 minutes?
Yes.
So
Okay.
when these other projects came,
Mm.
where women need support, for women to have support, they must have own land in their name.
Okay. Yes.
The land was put in their name, and they benefit from the support from the project. The project is basically on vegetable gardening. So the project will help fence the land for them, drill boreholes, build stores and toilets, and support them in their agricultural activities. So the Women Enterprise Fund will now complement the work of the project. So sometimes what's happening is that the project will only provide input, so not physical cash. So the women's group will now apply for loan from the Women Enterprise Fund to engage in other activities, so to sort of fill the gap. So now we are seeing the Women Enterprise Fund and those projects complementing each other. But there are some women who go still into entrepreneurship, buying goods and selling. So I think I have stopped here and allow you to continue with the other questions.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Sam, what about in Cameroon? If women now own lands in their name, why are they still struggling from what we see from the research? Okay, so I mean, some of these research have all been data verified, because as researchers, we report on what the data says. Now, the report still says in terms of finance for women entrepreneurs, there's still a huge gap between the male and the female, because banks are more inclined to finance men because they have collaterals and women don't get as much. So if what you say, the government has helped women to acquire lands in their names, so how come there's still that gap, because women don't have collateral when they go for finance?
Yes, what actually happens is that the banks, they don't discriminate as such. It's not because they are women that they can't obtain funding from the banks. The issue is that women have an advantage in that sometimes their husbands serve as surety for them to obtain loans from the banks. And sometimes they go around this issue by obtaining loans from cooperative or microfinance institutions. And there is another aspect of funding which women can get from cultural groups. They call them Njangis. These are cultural groups that meet monthly and make some deposits. And if you have any viable project, you can apply for a loan. Sometimes it goes up to 4 million, 5 million francs CFA. The only thing is that you need to have 2 witnesses to testify that you are able to pay back this money, and it will be given to you. The advantage with these Njangis or microfinances is that their interest rates are very low as compared to banks that have exorbitant interest rates. So there are many avenues open to women for obtaining funding for their projects. You just need to convince the institution that the project is viable, is a project that can help the community, and yes, you certainly get the funding.
Yeah, but now you're leaving it again. These are alternative finance sources. So yes, we now have to rely on alternative sources rather than the traditional sources that everybody will be the go-to source for everyone, because that is not working out for them. Now, whereas these traditional sources may be cheaper, but the term may also be shorter. So with a bank, you can get a loan for 10, 20 years. With these traditional sources, you may not be able to get it for 10, 20 years. And we know that a lot of businesses don't break even for 5 years even. A lot of businesses take longer than that to really break even. So when they're under pressure to repay that loan, it has a lot of impact on their empowerment. So why hasn't the policies of the government been able to address the traditional sources of funding to be more favorable to women? Why do they have to depend on these alternative sources?
No, it becomes easier for women if they constitute themselves into groups, maybe groups of development initiatives. And this time they get funding from the ministry that is in charge of vocational training and other medium and small size enterprises. So they get funding from such government bodies. Because as an individual, it becomes a bit difficult to get funding. But when you constitute yourselves in a group, you have an organized structure with rules and regulations, with a constitution, it makes it easier to attract funding from government.
Okay. All right, I'm going to ask the next question, and actually 2 more questions, and then we'll go on to the people who are in the meeting to see what questions they have to ask. So I'm going to go back to you, Honor. I'll start with you, Mr. Sam, because you're still in front of me, then I'll come to Honorable. What would you say are the biggest hindrances for empowering women in your country?
One of the hindrances is the reluctance of some women to go to school. The girl child, sometimes some of them rush into early marriages. So if you are not educated, it becomes a bit difficult to be empowered. But as the years go by, this situation is changing. You find that in some areas, women have become top-notch intellectuals, even in universities. So the situation is not as it used to be in the past. They are gradually getting education. They are gradually becoming professionals. And you find that in some structures in the country where you never found women, women are excelling.
If I hear you correctly, it's the lack of education.
Yeah, lack of education in a way, yeah.
Okay. But I thought that is a government issue then.
It's not really a government issue as such, because government has opened schools in nearly all the administrative units. So, and it is free of charge. They don't charge school fees in primary and secondary schools. We pay school fees only at the universities. So it is open to everybody, men and women alike, to be able to obtain education. So sometimes it is maybe parents who don't encourage their girl children to go to school. They think that maybe if they send them to early marriages, it will be a way of maybe getting money.
But they're doing that because of poverty.
Yes, because of poverty.
Yes. So but then
ignorance, not only poverty, but ignorance.
But then doesn't that become then a government issue? Because if the government puts a literacy program in place without taking care of the belly issues, let me put it that way, because people need to survive. Livelihood is an important factor. Now in Africa, in order for us to go beyond looking at our girls as a source of income, because when they get married, they bring in dowries, they bring in son-in-laws who have money, who will be able to come and get us out of poverty. So we see the girls as commodities for marriage, so that the marriage can in turn help us come out of poverty. So if we don't take care of the poverty issue, then the people will not stop seeing the girls as commodities for marriage. So is there a policy in place for the government to address issues of poverty, so that, because why is it only the girls who are not going to school? The boys are going because they're not seen as that kind of commodity.
Well, a lot of sensitization is going on with respect to that issue, and it gets to a point where even when girls who started school get pregnant, they allow them to give birth and come back to school. They don't dismiss them for getting pregnant. They allow them, give them time to go and give birth and then come back to school. Sometimes, even with desensitization, there are some people who are adamant. They don't receive this message. They take all their time to be able to follow steps that government has laid down for them. But it's going to be an issue where, especially in the rural areas, where some traditions, some women, maybe because of some traditional titles they hold, they feel that it will obstruct them to further their education.
Okay. Thank you so much. Honorable, can we come to you now? What do you think are the greatest hindrances in your country, Gambia, for empowering women?
Thank you very much. I think in Africa, we share a lot in common. Poverty is one, literacy, alimony. These are all interrelated. Even though in our education system, just as in Cameroon, primary and secondary school education is free. Before, it was free for only girls, but when we achieved parity, now it's free for all, boys and girls. And in some schools now, you see more girls than boys. But after grade 12, you see them dropping. It's more boys going to university than girls. We are still trying to find out why that is happening. Even though in some sectors they'll tell you that they want to get married. But as a result, we have put in a mechanism where we give scholarships to girls go to university. In my own ministry, we have a small project funded by ECOWAS where we support girls doing sciences. Because for us, we are trying to bridge the gender gap in science and technology. Any girl who wants to do science in the tertiary institutions, the colleges and the universities, we pay for you. But the hindrance that I mentioned earlier is more with the poverty. Some women want to marry up their girls early, even though government has in place a law against child marriage. And what if we normally come across those things happening, they will withdraw a girl from school to send her up to marriage. When we get the information, we intervene very quickly and make sure that the girl goes to school and continues in school. And just like in Cameroon also, when a girl in school becomes pregnant, we have the second chance education. When you deliver and you are strong enough, you have to go back to school or a different school. So all the things that we are putting in place for women's empowerment, some of the hindrances, illiteracy, poverty, child marriage, and traditional education practices in general. I know the issue of access to funds is gradually being addressed. The Women Enterprise Fund, which has an interest rate of only 5% as compared to the banks. And also, we have quite a number of private institutions in the Gambia which also give loans to women. Yeah, but I'm seeing a lot of improvement because we saw through UNICEF and Ministry of Education, we also have the mothers' clubs in some communities which are trained and sensitized, and they go into communities to advocate against child marriage and prevent children from school. So we have seen the mothers' clubs also playing a very pivotal role in this. Trying to sensitize communities, parents, to not withdraw their girls from school. And government is also with other partners supporting the communities because some will tell you that they treat the women, the children, so they just support them in their domestic chores. So what we do, we give support to some of those communities by drilling them boreholes, providing them living devices, so that time spent on domestic chores is cut down and they're able to allow the girls to continue schooling. So as I mentioned earlier, in Africa and in some Asian countries, the problems are similar, even though the magnitudes are different.
Okay, thank you. One more question, and then I'll leave it to the people in the meeting to ask their own questions. So I'm starting again with Honorary Mr. Sam. What is the way forward? So we've identified poverty, illiteracy, early marriage as issues hindering women empowerment in Cameroon and even in Gambia. What would you say is the way forward? How do we ensure that more women and girls are empowered? We're now coming into an digitally advanced world. And so if we carry over the same problems, it looks like we're not making progress. One step forward, 20 steps backwards. Now with all of the knowledge and the advancements in research and technology, what is the way forward to empower more women and girls in Gambia and in Cameroon? Honorable, you can go ahead.
Okay, good. For us, the way forward is to mainstream gender in the policies and our programs and make sure there's 30% representation across the board in the National Assembly, in women in management, and all these positions and also on boards. My ministry is working very hard to make sure that that happens. And I can happily say that yesterday, our president delivered his State of the Nation's address. He does that once every year. And that's one of the key things that he mentioned. That the government will make sure that 30% representation of women in decision making, including the parliament. That is going to be a process. It will not happen overnight. But once the president has made that pronouncement, now we as the Ministry of Gender will come in a private member bill, that will be an act of parliament, to make sure there are 30% representation across the board. And we are going to work with all the sectors in government, the NGOs, private sector, and the donors, of course, to make sure we have more women, 30% at least representation everywhere, in National Assembly, in cabinet, on the boards. It will require a lot of work. But the mere fact that has been mentioned by the president yesterday in his State of the Nation's address, it's a political pronouncement. It shows the commitment of government to ensure that women are economically empowered. We can't get women economically empowered if we don't address all the issues. So this is one key thing that I'm very proud to say. It's going to be a lot of work for my ministry, but we are ready to hold the bull by the horns and move. And it will be the same everywhere, in education, in every sector. Make sure that we have 30% representation of women. That's very, very important.
Okay.
We require a holistic approach to programming, where we involve everybody, the families, the communities, the districts, the regions, women at all levels, women and men at all levels, including young people as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Because I feel that this work cannot be done in isolation. We must bring everybody on board if we want to succeed in empowering women. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Nwanje, what is the way forward for Cameroon?
Yes, there is a way forward. First of all, government should organize scholarship schemes for women who excel in education. There should also be some schemes, financial loan schemes for women who come up with projects, especially for the rural area. You know that 51% of the population of Cameroon is occupied by women. Women account for 51% of the overall population of Cameroon. Their strength, their numbers are very strategic in the progress of our nation. So the government has every reason to organize scholarships. It has every reason to encourage women in their projects that they come up with. They have every reason come up with health schemes to be able to sensitize a child not to get pregnant while in school. Because with the boys, it's a different issue. They need to be educated in such a way that they avoid a teenage pregnancy. And government is doing this through a lot of sensitization programs that are done in schools. The other issue is trying to empower the women, educate them how to run their homes. That is why in all primary schools in Cameroon, you have what they call the domestic sciences, where they teach women how to do needlework, how to cook, so that when they reach the age of maturity, they will be able to take care of their homes as wives. So there are a number of avenues where government is focusing on the improvement of the lot of women.
Thank you. I did say Professor Colette was supposed to be part of this discussion because she was going to bring to us what the research is saying concerning what we found. We have discussed a lot. We've identified three main culprits here: poverty, illiteracy, early marriage. But one thing that has been missing from this discussion is corruption. Research has shown that corruption in Africa is really, really having a huge impact on women. It is because of corruption that a lot of the policies are not even implemented properly. That people who are asked to implement the policies because of corruption have not really done what they're supposed to do. And with the corruption studies, we have also seen how women are extorted, not for money because they don't have money to give, but they're extorted for sex. So there is a new focus now on sextortion in different countries in Africa. Now, so I want to share with you some of what we have found briefly, and then we'll get on to the people in the meeting so that they can be part of the discussion. Can you see my screen, everyone? Yes?
Yes, I can see it. Yes, I can see it.
Okay. So I'll try and make it bigger. Okay. So we'll just look briefly at what the studies have shown. So corruption has a huge impact, but more on women, because women are part of the vulnerable group. Okay, so they are extorted in so many ways. Now, in terms of access to finance, you have all, both of you have told us all that the government is doing to give women more access, but still they don't have enough access. They don't have access to financial resources. They don't have access to markets. They don't have access to even the services that they need to grow their businesses. The regulations also, there are challenges there because of some corruptions in the bureaus that process their documents. They don't get access to what they're supposed to have. Then also in the informal sector, women are mostly here, and most of the women in the informal sector are also illiterate, so they cannot pursue any legal recourse if they feel that they are being extorted by anybody. And because of this corruption, there has been a loss of revenue all round. But that's not where I'm going to focus my attention on now. Is the way forward. Is it possible that we can go beyond where we are? Everybody knows that there's corruption. Every government, ECOWAS, AU, SADC, all of them have corruption protocols in their policy agendas, but still nothing is being done. Why? Because we have a lot of weak institutions and weak systems, weak judicial systems. We heard some from a lawyer in South Africa saying that when women have cases that they bring to court, the judges, the magistrates, they want to sleep with them in order to even give them a fair judgment. So that brings us back to the case of sextortions, which is what I want to talk about today. Women being extorted for their bodies because they don't have money to pay. So Tabitha did a study in Kenya. Her PhD study was done in Kenya, and Kenyan women were being asked to sleep with men to get a space to sell their goods in the market. Just to even get a shop, you have to sell your body to get a shop to be able to put food on the table for your family. Now, my question to you, and I'm going to leave that slide because it's such a lot. I'll share it with everyone who has come to the meeting. My question to you, what is the government doing to protect women from sexual exploitation?
First of all, what the government has done in Cameroon is that they have created the Anti-Corruption Commission, which goes into investigative, they investigate all these causes of incidents of corruption, be it to men, to women. And they have a toll-free number. There's a toll-free number that if a woman in whatever circumstances is found being a victim of corruption, you call this number, and the person who is perpetrating this corruption will be investigated and prosecuted. And then you also have the National Commission on Bilingualism and Multiculturalism. What is this commission all about? It's about equity. It's about decency in public life, such that if anybody, by virtue of your power, your authority, you abuse women, maybe through your language, through any kind of insult, you are brought to book. And then there is this National Communications Council, which regulates our media space in such a way that, because sometimes this corruption is done even in social media, it's done through the internet, and these people are monitored. So if you are one of those people who is taking advantage of women through scamming, through fraud, and you are caught. You are brought to book. In Cameroon, it is noted that women who are in authority are very strict, are very rigorous in their management. And if you happen to go against women in terms of corruption, and you find yourself in front of a magistrate who is a lady, you will have the maximum penalty because there will be no mercy.
Okay, thank you. Madam Honorable.
Thank you very much. In the Gambia, I'm not aware of a situation where women are exploited because of their gender for them to be able to have access to a loan. Although we have put in place two laws way back in 2013, the Domestic Violence Act and the Sexual Offences Act. But I'm not aware of any incident where a woman needs a loan and she had to be expressed sexually so she can have access to that loan. I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
I'm also very much aware that the government of the Gambia is against corruption. But when it comes to women being expressed sexually because they need a loan or they need certain things which are part of their rights, no, I'm not aware of those things. But one thing is clear, corruption is illegal in this country. And we have the Domestic Violence Act and the Sexual Offences Act, which covers women so that they cannot be expressed sexually. Even though I'm not aware of an incident where they have to sell their bodies before they can have access to a loan or they can have access to something which is part of their right, part of their fundamental human right.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. Mr. Sam, I put up this slide so that you will see that when we looked at corruption, the problem that we have with corruption is that we have incumbent systems that needs to be shaken or dislodged. Now, when we talked about corruption, I talked about the political system, the justice, the judiciary system. All of these systems have been corrupted one way or another. So you're telling me now that laws have been put in place that when anybody is caught, that they will be dealt with very well. But the people who are implementing the laws are men. The people who are committing these, the people who are doing this against women are men. So how can they police themselves? How can they effectively protect the women when they're also the perpetrators of this? So do you think such a framework is even possible, that the people who are committing the same acts are kept in charge of policing the same acts that they are also responsible for? Because until we have more women making policies, until we have more women in those ranks that we don't currently have, it's very difficult to police. So we believe as researchers that the current structure is not working, because you're telling us all the good things, but the research is saying the people who are on the ground, their lived experiences are different. Not all of them have access to some of these things that you're talking about. Not all of them have experienced this. I'll give you a good example. During COVID-19, there was lockdown. The government in Nigeria put a COVID-19 policy that to help some businesses. And then I think it was in Ghana, really. So the policy was to help companies that had X number of employees. Some of these small businesses only have 1 or 2 or 3 employees. So they felt that they were not qualified. But they did not realize that they could come together, 5 or 6 or 7 businesses, and they will qualify for that, and they will do it like a teamwork. So while the government thinks we have done this, the people on ground did not even know how they could benefit from what the government have done, and there was no effort to let them know that this is what could happen. So there is a difference between what is on paper and the reality on ground for people, which is why we're having this discussion. So if you say on paper we have the laws in place to protect against people who do this or do that, but who are the ones implementing the laws? Are they not the same people who are perpetuating the laws? And will this be a way forward for us if we continue, or we need something new? So with that, I'm going to leave the floor open for anyone who has a question. I'm aware that when you came into the meeting, your mics were muted and your cameras were also turned off, but I've corrected that now. Any questions or any contributions from anybody? So simply raise your hands and then we'll take them one by one. Yes, Khadija too.
Good afternoon, Dr. Bridget.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to our speakers and colleagues here today. Just to say a very big thank you to the speakers firstly. It was a very interesting conversation. I guess for me, the most interesting part was listening to how the various speakers talked about, within their different contexts, the complex interaction between religious, social, and policy factors, and how all these impact women's economic empowerment, as well as their access to and control over land. So I have two questions. The first question is for Honorable Kinteh, and the second one is for Dr. Sam. So the question for Honorable Kinteh. So you mentioned when Dr. Bridget asked about some of the challenges, and you talked about various challenges such as poverty, illiteracy. I just wanted to understand, within the context of the Gambia, whether you see the large burden on women in terms of free domestic work, whether you feel this impacts women's economic empowerment, and if it does, to what extent or magnitude do you think this affects women's economic empowerment? So the one for Dr. Sam is a bit of a comment or a request. If you could provide a bit more information in terms of, so you mentioned a policy or an act around inheritance for women. So if you could throw a bit of light. And it was interesting to hear this, because I remember at some point I and Dr. Kemi were having some conversation about women and inheritance within Sub-Saharan Africa. So if you could throw a bit more light in terms of how that is working within the context of your country. Thank you.
Okay, I think I can start the ball rolling. Yes, I mentioned poverty because if you remember, in my definition of empowerment, I have said being able to have a say, being able to exercise their rights, being able to have their status improved. And women empowerment can be classified into three: economic empowerment, social, and political. Political empowerment is when women and men earn the same income for the same job done. When women are able to earn income to provide services. When the women and men are employed and they benefit equally in the remuneration and everything that goes with the employment. But again, here in the Gambia, you find a lot of women who are very poor, the full majority of the poor. As a result, to get them empowered is a problem. Okay, you use education as a challenge, because we've discovered that whether you're educated formally or informally, at least you earn some level of information about the thing that you have been educated on, and you can decide for yourself what to do and how to do it. We mentioned formal education, for example. When you are trained, you're educated, whether you are trained on a skill or you are trained in a formal setting. When you complete, you are employed either by an institution or you are self-employed, but you earn income for yourself, and you have control over the income. And say you're economically independent. So, but again, child marriage is also another issue, because we see girls being withdrawn from school as early as age 13 and this of marriage. So child marriage is a hindrance, because you are sent to school so you can acquire knowledge and all skills to be economically empowered. But if you are withdrawn from school early, you haven't learned much, you have no skill, then you get married to somebody even twice older than yourself. At the end of the day, you look at the particular nature of our society, you are dependent on the man. So you cannot be economically, you're not enslaved. So this is the reason why I have used those three as some of the issues: poverty, early marriage, and what was the other one? Poverty, education, and early marriage. But government is doing a lot in all of those. The education of the girl child, I had mentioned earlier, free education for the girls, now free education for all up to high school, in the public school. So we are able to acquire parity, secondary and high in primary and secondary schools. But the issue is now going to university, where we need to do a study to find out what are the courses. Even though some people will tell us that the girls want to get married, government has come with a scheme like my ministry, we have scholarship for girls who want to go to tertiary institutions and also go to university. So these three are some of the major issues. Although Bridget mentioned a corruption study, I've not seen the report, but all I know is that my government is against corruption. And I'm not aware of some of the things that, some of the findings that he mentioned, or she presented. I'm not aware of some of those things happening in the Gambia. But for sure, our main challenge is poverty, education, and also child money. And these things are being addressed by the government of the Gambia. Now, even though the women are illiterate, we are seeing them going to business and they succeed in business. Because when they go into business, now we are supporting them financially through the Women Enterprise Fund and some of the microfinance institutions. And they are trained in entrepreneurship to start and run a business at a profit. So we are seeing women now, although we encourage the group lending, but even within the group, we're not seeing some women graduate now to stand on their own. So they've acquired money to do their own business on their own. So I think that alone is positive. For example, like the Women Enterprise Fund that we are managing, we have a fund manager and also enterprise officers running that. With funding from the government, we have been able to reach out to 63,000 government women. 63,000 between 2020 December to now. And we have disbursed over 68 million Gambian dollars. And the recovery rate is high. It's 62%. You see, you really work as a group. Because if it's a group lending, group members support each other. You pay the loan. And then you pay, and then it's given to another group. So these are some of the things that the government has put in place to make sure that women economic empowerment is addressed. Because we all, it's very important for women to be economically empowered. But the formal education is also very important. This is why social are new to girls, so they pursue formal education, because yes, it's very important to empower those who are at the informal sector. Because remember, women form 52% of the population of the Gambia, and they form 56% of the electoral race. But we need more women in the each positions. My minister is working on the gender mainstream program, and I mentioned earlier, our president has said yesterday in his State of the Nation's address that the government is working towards coming up a private member bill to make sure that 30% representation at all levels, National Assembly, in cabinet, and everywhere. And that cannot be to educate the women to the highest level and give them all the support. So governments are doing a lot, because governments know very well that we cannot achieve sustainable development if women are left at the bottom of the ladder. That's why governments are coming on with all programs just to make sure that women are supported. Look, those in the agriculture sector, in the vegetable value chain, in the Gambia, for example, women have their vegetables. They go to the market. There is a glut in the market, and by the end of the day, it's either the vegetables get rotten, or some people come from the neighboring countries to buy them cheap. What has the government done? Come up with cold storage facilities. To make sure that when women go to sell their vegetables in the market, and then there's a leftover, they store in the cold storage facilities, so that there's no post-harvest loss. Then the following day, they were again to sell. A lot is being done to empower women economically before, because we saw the need for women economic empowerment. I think I'll stop there for now until I have other questions to respond.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Sam. Khadija to ask about land ownership, right? Khadija.
Yes, thank you so much. The legal framework for this women ownership, as I told you, is a convention that was ratified by Cameroon on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. And as soon as this was ratified in 1995, any woman who has issues of inheritance takes that matter to court, and the woman is given the rightful ownership of the property. So you see that a lot of things have changed, even in the issue of nationality. In Cameroon, you don't lose your nationality by virtue of marriage. So even when you are married to somebody who doesn't come from Cameroon, you don't lose your nationality. And in the past, women have always needed authorization to travel abroad from their husband. That is no longer the case. This issue of ownership, inheritance, has been backed up by the ratification of this convention of the elimination of all forms of discrimination.
Okay, thank you so much. Is there any more question?
Yeah, and come in there, If I have a comment on the issue of land ownership, I mentioned earlier that now women are beginning to own land. In urban areas, women own land. That's not the problem. In rural areas, it was a big problem because land was under customary tenure. But now we are seeing projects come up with projects with conditions or requirements that project can only support the women's group if the group has land in their name. So now we are seeing women owning land being in the name of the group, not the individual per se, but the group. But again, remember, in the communities or in the villages, women have access to legal rights, and as a result, because women marry in families, and families own land. But then, the land, your mother's land, that one you can use anyhow. But when you marry into a family, you can only you only have user rights, not ownership. You can farm on that land, but you don't own it. But if you are in a group now, and there is land, and the group gives the land to the group, and it is in the name of the group, so you benefit a lot from that. But as you get older and you move, you graduate out of the group, others coming into the group will also benefit from that. So we are going to work on a lot more on that, so that women can own land in the rural areas. It's not going to be easy because land in the rural areas is on a customary tenure. But here in the urban area, women own land. Government does allocations. There's no discrimination. Women government is allocating land, and some women also who are strong enough are able to buy land as well. But land ownership is very important. It's critical. It's very, very important. And we'll be working on some of those things to make sure that even in rural areas, women own more land. It will require a lot of effort, sensitization, and awareness creation. Because as I mentioned earlier, land in the rural areas is under customary tenure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to the speakers and everyone attending this afternoon. I just wanted to point out that it's not a question. I think it's just a comment and saying more. I think more needs to be done in terms of this access to finance, because I know there's a lot. You've mentioned a lot of things about, some women can only have access to finance if they belong to a group. Now, there are so many issues with being in a group. There are some women that may just prefer to do these things on their own. And if they cannot access such finance as a result of not being in the group, then there is a problem. Because there are cases where some women may be treated differently even within the group because of status quo. Like, obviously, there are some women that have more resources than others. And so those with more resources are treated way better than those with less. So I think more needs to be done in that area and just, increase this empowerment of women, like in terms of the access to finance.
Thank you so much.
There, please?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I mentioned the Women Enterprise Fund, which has come into being through a legal framework, and it's the conditions are that you have to be part of a group. But we have seen, because of the success of the Enterprise Fund, we are not seeing some women graduating from the group and operating on their own individually. So what we have done as a government, as part of innovative financing, we have approached African Development Bank to see how we can support individual women as well. And ADB has asked us to do a proposal, which we have done, and they are willing to support individual women who have graduated from the group. So hopefully, I'm praying very hard, and I want all of you to pray for me, so that before the end of the year, we can get the funding from the African Development Bank to support individual women. It's very, very important. It's important to support those in a group. It's also important to support those as individuals. Because after all, we are working with women's economic empowerment, and women are at different levels. Wherever they are, it's their right to give the support. So in the Gambia, very soon, God willing, we will be getting funding from the African Development Bank to support women as individuals. Even though the Enterprise Fund is going to be further strengthened to support those who are in groups as well. So we have two models. The Enterprise Fund supporting women's groups. The Enterprise Fund also supporting individual women. So be rest assured, here there's no discrimination. We support women at all levels. What's important is to make sure that they're economically independent, their status is improved, and poverty is alleviated. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for your contributions, for your patience throughout today. And today, one of our speakers got COVID, so she just couldn't make it. And the other one also, I don't know why I've been unable to reach her. So maybe it's connection problem because she's in Botswana, and the connection there is also not very good. So, but for the two speakers who have been able to speak to us today, thank you. We do not take this for granted. We know that you're very busy, but you've made time to come talk to us today. And we hope that we'll have more opportunities to call on you in the future so that you can come and speak to us about issues concerning women and girls. So all of you who are here, thank you very much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you all in the next webinar.
Thank you so
very
much, Dr.
Thank
Kinteh.
you.
Pleasure. I want to thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this webinar.